Welcome to the Mindful Millennial Podcast, where host Seth Marcus dissects and discusses all things impacting the millennial mind. Mentors, peers, and professionals share intimate conversations on subjects such as entrepreneurship, exercise and health, the blessings and curses of technology, travel, and how to navigate adulthood in this age of information. We're the largest generation in history, and we dictate the future. The Mindful Millennial finds a signal through the noise.
Never do that again.
just for you. So this is a Mindful Millennial. We're doing another episode, this time with Jake Holschuh, photographer at large. Say hello, buddy.
Hi, Seth. Hi, crowd. Audience.
We're still in the pre-launch phases, so bear with us as we fight through the challenges of getting this whole thing started. But today's episode is more of a practice for myself. I figure no one's going to listen to this unless they kind of know where I'm coming from and where we're going with this whole endeavor. So I figured I would bring on one of my current partners to discuss things.
Partners in crime.
Exactly. So Jake Holschuh is a phenomenal photographer and videographer, and recently we've been working on a featurette together here in Denver, Colorado, where we were talking to the 40 most impactful people in Denver, doing video interviews, full kind of from start to finish, full interview, portrait shots, drone footage, B-roll, everything for a local magazine. And he's also been helping me a lot with the formulation of this podcast. So the idea was to bring him on, and we were going to talk a bit about
Seth.
About me.
It's always about Seth.
Which is exactly why I needed someone to come on, because I just could not bring myself to sit in my office and just talk about myself by myself. It just couldn't handle it. So Jake is nice enough to stop doing what he's doing and help me with some of the things that I've got going on. So today's episode is all about what this podcast is all about, and my journey that led me to the podcast, as well as the mission and what we're trying to get out of the podcast. So I think the first thing that I'll do is kind of break in my host a little bit by just kind of asking Jake to say something, because I feel like he's a little shy right now.
I am a little shy. It's a little intimidating being on this microphone.
It's funny, right? Because I don't have that really, mainly because
you're a musician and
exactly because I've had to sing and I've had my voice crack at high notes in front of 75 people, and Jake's always the one behind the
Exactly, being behind the camera all the time, you start to become uncomfortable being the center of attention.
Right.
That's why I ended up getting out of fine arts, because I hated being the center of attention.
What was
I like to connect with people more than I like to show off in terms of my photography.
And I think by nature, being a photographer is like, your credibility and your image is based completely off of your work and how you capture the things around you, as opposed to what you are producing then, there, and now, which is where this podcast comes into play, which is instantaneous conversation.
Yep.
So, just starting off, man, like, I actually don't know the answer to this question. What drew you to photography? What was your beginnings? I
don't have an epic story that a lot of photographers have, of like growing up with like the camera in their hands from their like father, who was like the photographer, or some producer, or some big shot, that helps kind of propel you in the arts. Like, I was never really encouraged. Like, I was encouraged in the arts by my family, but never really pushed that direction. They didn't really push me in any direction. But my parents aren't necessarily artistic people. They're lawyers. They're interesting, awesome people, but the artistic side's not necessarily there. And in high school, I was kind of the outcast. I never really enjoyed like my science, chemistry classes or anything like that. And the one outlet I always had was like my art class with my photography teacher, Mr. Vesper, who I'm still in touch with now. And he's kind of been a mentor for me and an inspiration for a long time. He kind of bonded with me on a personal level, which a lot of teachers wouldn't. And that kind of attracted me to photography, and shot a lot in like high school, just random like landscape and my travels and things like that. And then eventually I was in school at CU for 2 years, undecided, had no idea really where I was headed and like what I wanted to do. Kind of had like a breakdown moment where I was tired of Boulder and tired of the people I had been hanging out with and doing the same thing over and over again. And I decided to transfer down to a small art school and kind of go back to what encouraged me in high school, in terms of schooling and like education, what I was really interested in. And ever since, went to art school, was doing the fine art photography thing while there, and still trying to shoot documentive stuff kind of involved with that, and showed in some galleries, was interning at a gallery, and quickly kind of became upset with that scene and what it is. I know it's not like that everywhere, but from what I saw, it was very ego-based, and it's not really what I view my photography as,
Sure.
It's not about me, it's about the subject. And,
that's what separates you from, Instagram celebrities, selfie generation.
Yeah, and our interactions together, I think is, I'm going to forget his name, but I watched this, it's like on the Abstract series now on Netflix. It's about design, but there's one about this photographer, Platon.
I haven't made it all the way through the series, but it's like my total guilty pleasure.
Just told about it. But, his whole thing was, he doesn't use a digital camera. He uses film. I use digital. But part of the reason he doesn't use digital is because he doesn't like always to be like looking at his camera and interacting with his camera rather than interacting with these individuals he's shooting. He's a portrait photographer. He shot like every president, like Putin, like Gaddafi, like,
He's been around.
Yeah. And he was really, his whole point was about the interaction and getting to know these people and truly getting to know their story rather than trying to make them something or not. He obviously poses as like the people he's shooting still, and has them do things he thinks kind of shows their true side after having those interactions. And it's really based more around like the conversation than it is the actual photograph. The photograph's the product, but the photograph kind of evolves out of the conversation they've had and the interactions with these individuals, I guess.
Yeah. In, someone who's worked with you so closely for, 6 months now, and we've been friends for longer, and I know your family. A couple things is, I find it interesting that your art is your business. So, coming from more business-minded family, you are an artist that is making a living doing it. And your sister, who is kind of in the similar line. Like, she's gone a very holistic and natural path. She's a massage therapist and does craniosacral therapy up in Steamboat, Colorado right now. Another beautiful person, but definitely a very artistic person. So I think it's interesting that such artistic characteristics can come out of a very cut and dry family as far as, very business minded.
Yeah, I was like cut and dry, but at the same time, we grew up in a very conservative area, Anderson Township, Cincinnati, Iowa. It's just like not much there besides suburbs. And, so you have those like small town, like conservative people. And my parents weren't really that, they were liberals, and they were more open to trying other things and, not necessarily driving us down one path. Like I know a lot of friends growing up that were like kind of told what to do. And my parents never once did that to any of us,
Yeah.
And I mean, my brother is now John David Holschuh III after my father and grandfather, judges and lawyers, and he's kind of following that path, and he was never told to, he kind of did it because he loved it, and like he loved what they did. And I think me and my sister just, we have like our uncle is like a trumpet player, we have like those connections in our like blood, I feel like still, like the artistic bloodline. But I think we just kind of chose our own paths in a sense because our parents led us.
We share a lot of upbringing. We're a few years apart in age, but we're both from Cincinnati, Ohio, and we both kind of know what it was like growing up in the 90s in a more conservative area of the country where there really was a status quo. And I remember when I was growing up, you were pretty much ostracized for not going just true Republican, at least where I was.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember friends running out, like, being pranksters in high school and going and trying to get John Kerry posters off of people's yards, and just George W. all the way.
There's
and
fighting over it,
right.
growing up being young. It wasn't really about even what we knew. That's just being kids. It was more just about what our parents told us and who who they believed.
Yeah,
and
trying to make the other person feel inferior.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
'cause you seem to know it up, and we're all just dumb 16-year-olds.
I have this distinct memory of being. It was like the Al Gore Bush, where Al Gore won the popular vote, and then Bush ended up right now. But I remember he's a good friend of mine still, but we were just sitting in the lobby of our school, and the announcement had just come through that George Bush was going to become president, and we had this huge it was just a stupid feud, totally pointless, and just.
Can you imagine the teachers who are probably a bit more educated about it and actually read and done their research and know how the world works, and they're just sitting there listening to freshmen calling each other fag or something.
Yeah,
just
definitely.
and because people think differently than them. That's just where we came from.
But at the same time, I think that is still
now.
very present even within adults in our culture. If you look at our current situation, it's just viewed as a battle. It's not about understanding each other. It's viewed
right.
It's what we were doing, and I think we're a little mindful now
right.
about our current situation. I think a lot of people are becoming more mindful about our current situation, but for a long time it's just been 1v1, this side versus that side, and
right.
Yeah.
And now that there's so much more information available, people can just pull it from any place and structure their opinions about things by just sourcing from anywhere they can. I mean, they'll literally Google their exact opinion and look for something that eloquently puts their opinion into a sound clip or a video clip or a small paragraph, and they repost that to Facebook and fight with people over comments. And it's just come on, guys, where are we going? This isn't helping anything. So I think that kind of boils it down to why this podcast is starting is through our project, the Westward Project. We just saw so many people who are actively pursuing their passions and cared so much about their community. It inspired me, and I know we've talked about how much it's inspired you to take general activism and wanting to share with your community and connect with the people around you. And not only here in Colorado where we're based, although that seems to be the only way to really affect real change is to start change in your immediate community. But the point is people can do that anywhere. There's so many people arguing over the internet, but there's also so many people agreeing over the internet. And there's people right around you in your same neighborhood that not only agree with you, but are just as charged to take action on something that they care about, whether that's an expansion, a building expansion in a neighborhood that could have terrible environmental consequences, or that's incredibly over budget and it's not a good way to use the taxpayers' money. There's just so many different causes and so much chaos going on right now that it's just paramount that people start organizing around their ideology, as opposed to feeling like they're alone and having to voice out via social media just for thumbs ups or people wanting to spur arguments. It just seems so hollow.
Well, I heard Al Gore talk yesterday, and coming from the ex-vice president of the United States, he was saying how politics just delay things. They don't ever get anything done. It's really just the people who get things done. And until it becomes to a certain a point and attention and amount of people that are fighting for something, it's just going to keep going back and forth until the people really show their power, and which is happening now, I think. So
yeah. So there's so much going on right now. It's insane. And one of the things that I'll probably touch on here in a future episode is the importance of marginalizing the amount of information you are bringing in. nowadays, I mean, you can set alerts so that every 5 minutes you are getting a headline posted on your phone, something new for you to focus on and have an opinion on. And it's just so scattered and so indirect that you can never affect change on something that you really care about, because you've so quickly lost your attention on that cause and moved on to the next cause. And I think as long as our population as a whole continues to stay that sensational, where the next actor that dies, the next oil leak, the next police shooting, it just draws all attention to that for whatever their 20 minutes may be, a week, 2 weeks, 2 hours. It could be, and then it's on to the next thing. And as long as that's happening, where we can't seem to stay focused on a permanent change. So I guess with that, let's dive into why the Mindful Millennial exists. So my name's Seth Marcus. I come from Cincinnati, Ohio. I just turned 30 years old, and I've been living in Denver for about 8 years now. I went to a conservative Christian high school. I was brought up Christian, pretty devout Christian. However, half of my family is also Jewish, so I did see a little bit of like religious diversity growing up, and also a little bit of kind of mixed thoughts. I learned such a strong moral compass from my mother, who is just an absolute saint, and she's a doctor. She's worked her entire life caring for the people around her. She's one of the kindest individuals I know. Something that I strive to be every day. And my father, who is a psychologist, who is brought up Jewish, but is very agnostic at this point, and is very much a psychologist's mind. He's very analytical. He's a hard worker. He has a little bit of a temper, but he's also an incredibly disciplined individual. He's worked so hard his entire life. He's supported me through private high school and college, and he's just been an emotional support for me my whole life. I graduated from high school, and as much as I felt comfortable in Cincinnati, I knew that it was time for me to jet out. I started looking at out-of-state schools, and I found Clemson University, go Tigers, as my college of choice. Wanted to be close enough to home that I could drive. Wanted to have a football school. And especially good academics and a great student body. And Clemson embodied all of those. Was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. I absolutely adore Clemson and the experiences I had there. But more importantly than where I went was just leaving home was such a huge growing experience for me, because I had spent my entire life kind of forming this personality around my friends and my beliefs coming from Cincinnati, which we've already discussed has its own ups and downs and pitfalls. And coming to Clemson, there is an overall vibe of being at a Southern school, heavy Greek life, sports. But when you're at a school of that large, you really have the freedom to mold it into any sort of experience you want. Any extracurricular that you're interested in, there's a community to help support that. And there's such a unity among the student body because of our passion for our football team. And so there is that kind of unification. Plus, it being in a small town, there's a great community around that, as opposed to going to a school in the city of Denver, or College of Charleston comes to mind, where there's a lot of students, but everyone is kind of floating around a large city where they're interacting with people who just live in the city and people who work and people and families. So growing up in Clemson, it made me feel like a community, like a very tight-knit group, and also gave me that college view of just this myopic society where, being popular and being cool and being active in Clemson is success. And that's a rude awakening when you leave college and realize it was all fleeting. But at the time, it was a great experience. So my experience in Clemson was basically a huge reset button. I didn't feel confined to hanging out with my same friends that I hung out in high school every day of my life. Or my friends back in my hometown that I grew up and rode bikes with. I could choose my friends. I could choose my activities. I could choose my major and the classes I took within that major. And that gave me just a ton of freedom to really pursue what I wanted to do. And at the time, I had just come off of 2 years of studying electric bass and percussion for the jazz band at my high school. And I loved bass, but I felt a little confined by reading jazz charts and playing kind of proper dress-up recital sort of performances. So I really wanted to look into a band. So I put out a Facebook invite, and at this time Facebook was incredibly small and for students only, so it was much more of a small network. And I found a few common people who had interests in things like guitar or music or the band Fish, and I reached out to these people and met what became one of my best friends of my whole life, a guy named Jai Schaefer, a guitar player. And the reason I bring him up is because that really shaped my entire college life. I gravitated to that. It was essentially my dissertation. It was my chance to continue practicing music, to write, to organize, and to schedule band rehearsals, to promote and make our band something that people cared about, to get booked and to get paid. It was my job. It was the best job because I loved every minute of it. And we would practice during the week and then play during the weekends. So while everyone else is working so they could spend their money at the bars or parties or, just spend their money frivolously, we were getting paid to party. We were getting paid to meet people and to, talk to girls and to make new friends and everything. It was an amazing experience, and it completely shaped my artistic output and what I wanted to do. So that was probably one of the most defining parts of my life, were those 4 years in the band. And, as a lot of college students, your major is your major, and some people really gravitate towards it, and some people leave and have their degree and hardly touch it. They put it up on their wall, and that's about it. It's just a nice piece of art. I wouldn't say it was quite like that, because there are a lot of tools that I applied to it, but I didn't leave and immediately look for corporate America. In fact, where I was led to was I wanted to, once again, distance myself from the person that I had created in college. By the time I was getting ready to graduate, I had experienced the band and the college lifestyle, partying, studying, all-nighters, everything, and I was ready for another reset, kind of an introduction into my young adult life. So my cousin, who is, my brother, as his name is Mike, he lives out here, I had visited him a few times, fell in love with Denver, and he offered me an opportunity to stay in their basement right out of college. And that was a huge opportunity for me to not retreat back to Cincinnati and figure it out from there, which could have easily led to me hanging out with some of the old high school friends, going to bars and finding a job. And, next thing you know, 45. The ability for me to leave and come out to Colorado was a huge opportunity and a huge leap out of my comfort zone. And I did it. I left within a month of graduating, moved all my stuff out here to Denver, Colorado, and stayed in my cousin's basement with at the time 3 kids. Now they have 4, and my cousin and his wife. And I'd say that was another enormous growth period for me, because I came out there as a raggedy 22-year-old with a chip on his shoulder from being cool in college and, and associating every weekend with drinking or smoking weed or whatever. And I came out and realized that 1, I didn't have any friends out here. 2, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a career lined up for me. And 3, I had a lot of childlike tendencies for someone who was trying to claim to be an adult. I think a lot of college kids probably level with that when they pop out of college. But luckily, I landed in a place that was this nice mix between independence and guidance, where my family out here in Colorado were successful, progressive, smart, driven individuals that were also parents. And I distinctly remember a conversation about a month or so into me living in their basement where they said, "Seth, we have 3 kids and you are not one of them. You are an adult now. You are staying in our home, and we want another adult here. We do not want another child here. And it wasn't like a night and day experience, but it kind of hit it shifted me to the point where I was like, now I'm helping with dinner every night. I'm either cleaning it or I'm help prepping it. I'm being responsible. I'm cleaning up after myself. I'm taking advice from people who have extremely busy lives. I'm less binge watching my TV shows and more getting out and studying a concept that I am really interested in, or trying to push music again, or just finding a new job, something just searching for the meaning of being an adult and finding purpose. It wasn't an easy road, and it's still going to this day, but that was a really pivotal moment for me where I found that I didn't know it all. It wasn't I will inevitably be a millionaire. Success will just come my way, which was a lot of people's opinions in coming out of college. I started working at a cannabis facility. This was back in 2009 as the medical industry here in Colorado started to really bloom. and it was miserable. I had a job up in Boulder, and I quickly realized that I was not fit out for this job. It was not a professional environment, and I learned very quickly that the cannabis industry was incredibly primitive. It was still very much black market trying to show a good face. I was not cut out for that. I butted heads with the owner, and it culminated in the owner sitting me down and saying, Seth, there's some things that people just can't do. And what he was inferring was that I was not smart enough to work in this cannabis facility. I wasn't smart enough to grow cannabis. I wasn't smart enough to run a business or to just take instruction. And just like that, the conversation I just alluded to about how we have 3 kids and you're not one of them conversation, that was another pivotal moment for me, because that was the time when I knew, and I vocalized to the guy, don't ever fucking tell me what I can't do. I knew that this was not just me being a dumbass. I knew that there was more to it. And I immediately left the job. I came back and just found some coffee shop work. I was bussing tables at Sushi Den, which is here in Denver. And I was spending my days reading. I was reading on cannabis horticulture and horticulture in general. I knew that this industry was starting right now, and there was a lot of opportunity, and that with my business background, I could apply it directly to the cannabis industry, and I wanted to set myself apart. I also desperately wanted to prove this person wrong. I had this dream of like 5 years down the road, I'd be this millionaire ganjapreneur, if you will, and I'd run into him at some event and be like, never fucking tell me what I can't do.
What are you doing now?
Exactly. That spiteful, I'll show him sort of attitude, which, it can be very driving, and it can be very motivating, but it's not necessarily the most healthy life. It's just a spiteful life. So that was really where it all popped off. And then that learning took hold when I switched jobs from bussing tables at Sushi Den to working at a horticulture facility, a place that worked with the cannabis facilities all over the city, supplying them with their growing equipment and helping them with their growing methods. And it was a huge network for every cannabis business owner, every horticulture manager, and even the home growing community that was all coming in, wanting to build grow rooms, from little closet spaces to multiple 100,000-foot warehouses. And that was where my learning went from solo book learning to massive forum style learning anything and everything in a very quick pace. And that was the real catalyst for my entry into the cannabis world, where for about the next 9 months, I was working at this horticulture facility and working off hours, doing consulting and helping people build out their operations, meeting a lot of people in this cannabis space, and really starting to see a future in this whole thing. Eventually, I couldn't keep consulting and working at the horticulture facility at the same time, so I opted to go out on my own and start consulting. And that lasted for about 3 months of me doing kind of some oddball work and helping people, until one of my clients asked me if I would consider a full-time position with them. And that was the beginning of a 3-year experience of me coming from the basic trim work and putting water into plants and anything and everything, to becoming the manager of the facility and having a team of 6 with coinciding calendars and working on the retail side of things as a dispensary manager and really organizing this entire operations of the facility. That was obviously a huge learning experience in organization and management, as well as in the cannabis space, which then kind of hit a ceiling. I realized that as much as I love the cannabis horticulture side of things and this industry and all the potential, when you are in that position, it's a pretty isolated job. You're in rooms with just fields and fields of plants all day, every day. You are doing the same work over and over and over again. And once you get to a certain point, there's very little room for advancing, both in like your job position, your pay, as well as your stimulation, where you can continue to grow and evolve. So by that point, I had some money saved up, and I had been desperately wanting to jump out of my comfort zone again. And I had been also practicing yoga for about 2.5 years. And I decided that travel was coming my way. So I decided to give my job about a 2-month notice for good measure and plan an excursion. And I decided to go to Indonesia for about 3 months to pursue a yoga teaching certification at a reputable area of Bali for yoga, as well as spend a few months just doing the traveler thing, scuba diving, seeing the sights, meeting new people, trying new foods, taking some chances, everything that you get out of travel, which was it's a life-changing event that I would encourage every single person on this planet to do, is get out of your culture, see what else is out there. Be objective and take a second to really put into perspective your lifestyle, especially us Americans. And we get so caught up in our everyday lives and our paychecks and our friend group and our relationships and anything and everything, our status. And then you take a second to go out to another part of the world, and it just puts everything in such perspective to see how people live with such little means, or they eat what is around them, what they grow, what they catch, and how happy they are with 2% of what we have here in America, and how unhappy we can be with everything, with a grocery store right down the block. That experience just totally just shifted me in a way where I just couldn't see things the same way I did when I returned. So my yoga teaching certification and what I learned from that and during the travel experience was just so profound that coming back, I decided to step back and to start some other ventures. And in the following 2 years, I found myself in a number of different startup companies, either as a founder or as a consultant, helping get things off the ground, or as an early employee, helping with business development and things of that nature, which was also, once again, a huge learning experience. A lot of trials and tribulations for all of those out there listening that are dead set on entering into the startup realm, whether it's tech or cannabis or any of these new renewable energy sort of industries. There's a give and take. When you're a corporate, you know that you're getting a steady paycheck. You know that there's going to be some very boring days. You know that there's going to be a lack of fulfillment in a lot of those positions, but there's also stability in that. When you're in the startup world, there's a chance that your paycheck will never come. There's a chance the core team will fall apart. The investment won't come through. There's just so many unknowns that you have to be able to roll with the punches. You can't expect corporate stability from a company that's been around for 20, 30 years and with a company with new business owners with very little experience, no proof of concept, and very little money. You just can't expect that, which was a great chance for me to thicken my skin and understand what I need to provide and what I need to make sure I obtain when I'm engaging in these projects. So after a few years of varied success in the startup world, I found myself back in the cannabis space. A consulting group had brought me in with kind of my skill set of having managerial experience, having a business background, to work as a consultant for them. And For the next year, I spent my time helping new companies all over the country with compliance and setting up their business, setting up their grow operation, obtaining financing, writing their standard operating procedures, auditing their facilities to ensure that they're working up to the standards of the law in that state, and introducing these young business owners to expect in the cannabis space. And that was a really rewarding time. But in the end, I just realized that I had grown outside of the cannabis industry, at least for now. I had done so many different jobs and had so much experience in there, and I still see it as this amazing subculture industry that has such power to change the country, especially when you start to include industrial hemp and the CBD applications of cannabis. But I had just kind of reached my limit. There's a saying that the pioneers get the arrows and the settlers get the land, and that is kind of how I felt. I felt like a pioneer, and I was getting a lot of arrows. I had been led down the wrong path. I had spent years at companies that did not have intentions for me to grow with them. It was more of a, you do your job and we will continue to grow sort of mentality, as opposed to like, let's all grow together. Let's move this thing ahead. Let's let you flourish. It was more, you do X, Y, Z, we do whatever we want, and you guys pick up the pieces sort of mentality. I just couldn't live with that any longer. So I decided to this time go out and see what South America was all about. So in the fall of last year, I went to Peru for a month, in which case I did another yoga teaching, this time an advanced course. And in the process of that advanced course, I experienced ceremonies with plant medicines, specifically ayahuasca and San Pedro, which in Huachuma, the Peruvian native language, is called Huachuma. So those experiences, as well as once again seeing another culture, this time traveling by myself, it really opened me up to the power of silence and the power of having a still mind. There's so much distraction in our world right now, especially here in America with everyone's smartphone push alerts that just go off every minute, people wanting your attention, companies wanting to sell you things. It's maddening. And we say that it's ADD, ADHD, whatever it is, but I firmly believe that it's the amount of input that we're getting that is the difference. When I turned off my phone and I focused on reading books and writing in my journal and communicating with the locals in Peru and going on hikes through the Andes, I realized how much clearer I thought and how I could focus for an hour and a half on a concept or on a book or anything. And it was like, whoa, all of a sudden I don't have ADD. And I realized it was because my phone's not vibrating. My phone's not pulling me away. My friends aren't calling me to hang out. And I recognize that I love America. I love being in this state where we have freedom to do whatever we want. And there's so much opportunity here, and there's so much available to us at any given time. But I think the art of it is limiting yourself and living in a world of a discipline, not in the form of rigidity and restricting yourself from certain things, but creating your own boundaries and excelling inside of those boundaries in order to really flourish in all areas of your life. I think that if we don't set our own parameters, other people do it for us. If we don't start our own venture, we take a job and we live by other people's rules. If we stay in a relationship that is not healthy for us, we are immediately living in an unhealthy relationship with someone else. And that is more time, our most precious asset, that is depleting as we don't make our own choices. So I think the ability to seek what is most important to you and structure a life around that, and most importantly, understand where the distractions lie and mitigate them, is about as important of a life law that I live by. And that brings us to today. I got back from Peru. I had 3 job offers, good job offers, all of them in the cannabis industry, and they just were not feeling right. It wasn't a fuck yeah, like let's get going on this. It just didn't feel that way. And I really thought on that for a bit, and I decided at the end, I was like, no, I am going to say no to all of these. I'm going to focus on myself. I'm going to strengthen this practice of stillness that I have learned to love so much. And I'm going to give myself some time to grow internally and see where that takes me. And it's only been about 3 months since I said no to those jobs, and the amount of internal growth and the opportunities externally of just amazing opportunities for me to pursue have come like streaming in. And it's just been such a huge, impactful time in my life to understand the power of saying no to some of these opportunities in order to pursue what really is your passion. And that led me to this opportunity to interview Denver's 40 most impactful people, which every single interview was so profound. And there were so many people that were living this passionate lifestyle and desperately trying to grab the community around their beliefs and what they wanted to see change in their community around them. And it was very inspiring. It led me to recognize that I'm not helping the situation by watching Vice News every night and then getting online and yelling at people who don't share my viewpoint, or clickbait and looking through Facebook for things that upset me. There's room for us to have a voice. There's a community out there that is dying to have a fulfilling life. And that's what other reason is there to live, you know? I've never been happier doing this project, even though the money is little to non-existent when it comes to doing some of these video interviews. It led me to finding my voice and to approaching this podcast. So here we are in my home doing the first episodes of the Mindful Millennial.
That was good.
Was it? I feel like there's only one way to cap off like a 30-minute monologue like that.
Bumbleclap Radio.